Okay, continuing our discussions on auto rotations, I think it was in the first auto rotation video, I mentioned the reasons why you might want to enter an auto rotation. And those reasons at that time I discussed were, number one, the engine quits. That's a very good reason to enter an auto. Number two, you're on fire, either a cabin fire, electrical fire in the cabin, or a engine compartment fire. Either one, those, again, very good reasons to enter an auto. And if you lost the tail rotor, again, you need to do auto rotation, that being a full down auto rotation, to be able to get the aircraft back on the ground safely. Now, one of the things I didn't mention was another good reason to enter an auto rotation would be if you had clutch malfunction on a Robinson helicopter. The R-22 and the R-44, just tell you a little bit quickly how the clutch is designed. But basically the clutch is designed, it has a sheave or a pulley that's on the end of the engine, and another sheave or pulley wheel basically that's up here on the drivetrain, and there's a series of belts that connect the two. In between those two sheaves is a screw jack, and it has a little motor that turns, and that the motor turns one way, it actually pushes the pulleys apart to tighten the belts, and if it turns the other way, it actually goes the other way to loosen the drive belts on it. Okay. When we start the engine up, it's not under a load. We get the engine running, and then we engage the clutch, and so the screw jack comes on, and it pushes the belts apart, gets the blades turning. And we do that because you don't want to start the engine under a load. Helicopters don't start under a load. You're not turning the blades when they first start. And so that's the purpose of that clutch assembly, is to then bring the blades in online, and so that your engine's driving the blades. Within that clutch assembly itself, there's also a freewheeling unit that works like a ratchet, so that when the engine is turning, it's actually driving the rotors and driving the drivetrain. But if the engine was to stop, it acts like a ratchet and it freewheels one, thus the name freewheeling unit. And it freewheels, and so that the engine, despite the fact that the engine has stopped, it does not drag down the rotor RPM and cause you to get a rotor stall. So that's the simplistic form of how the clutch assembly works on the Robinson helicopter. So after we've engaged the clutch and we've spun it all up, then if you pick the aircraft up and you're flying around for a bit, not uncommonly the clutch light will come on. The clutch light comes on if it's tightening or if it's loosening the belts. Tightening or loosening, either one, the clutch light's on. And the rule of thumb is the clutch light in flight, if you're up flying around, the clutch light should not stay on for 10 seconds or more. If the clutch light stays on for more than 10 seconds, you got a problem. You don't know exactly what the problem is at the time in the flight, but you've got a problem. Your clutch should not normally come on for 10 seconds or more. Right? And if that happens to you, the clutch light comes on and it's on for 10 seconds. If it's not accompanied by any abnormal vibration or noise, that sort of thing, you're supposed to reach over and pull the breaker on the clutch. And the clutch breakers, we typically keep a little red ring around the clutch breaker so that it makes it easier to find even at night. And you pull the clutch breaker and then try to reduce the power to some degree, and then land as soon as practical. Practical means as soon as you can get it on the ground in a spot to put it, Okay, and if the clutch light comes on for 10 seconds or more, and it's accompanied by any sort of abnormal vibration or noise, then you're supposed to land immediately via good old auto rotation, right? Or land immediately and be prepared to put the thing into an auto rotation if things get worse. Okay? So one day I was taking off from runway 2 here. Runway 2 is 20 degrees outbound to the north. Right off the end of the runway is the interstate, and there's a truck stop just on the other side of the interstate. And behind that truck stop is a fairly good sized grass field. I don't know, maybe a couple acres, 2 or 3, 4 acres, something like that. And as I took off, and this is Murphy's Law, of course I got a guy with me that's never flown in anything before, never flown in a helicopter, an airplane, gyroplane. I don't know if he's flown a kite or not, but anyway, guy had never flown in anything. And I'm taking him for a quick ride. He was a friend of a friend sort of thing. So I'm taking the guy for a quick ride. He's never flown in anything before. So we take off from runway 2, and we're on climb out, and I get just past the interstate, and I'm probably, 200 feet in the air, something like that, on climb out. And clutch light comes on, and it stays on for longer than 10 seconds. In fact, it stayed on the whole time. So I knew where the field was. I knew that I could make it to the field. I had it in sight. So I just entered an auto rotation and did an auto rotation into the field behind the truck stop, and got the thing on the ground. And but the reason for it was the fact that the clutch light had been on for 10 seconds or more. So anyway, we get on the ground. I ask the guy, I'm like, "You okay, man? You good?" He's like, "As far as I know, I'm good." "What happened?" I'm like, "Well, I had to run. I had a problem with the clutch, and so I put the thing on the ground pretty quick here." And he's like, "Well, man, that's the coolest thing I've ever done in my life," or whatever. I'm like, "Yeah, you need to get out more, because that's whatever." So, and what had happened is the wire that goes to the little motor. There's a little motor that runs the screw jack that pushes the pulleys apart. The wire going to that motor actually had a break in the wire, but it was inside the insulation where you couldn't see it. And I guess it had been like that since the aircraft was new. Aircraft had about 12 or 1,400 hours on it at the time, and I guess that the two pieces of wire was touching each other the entire time inside the insulation, but eventually they got enough of a little bit of play in the insulation where the wires were no longer touching each other. Wasn't completing the circuit. I still had the light lit up. It was still, it was sending the impulse to the motor, but the motor wasn't turning, so the light stayed on. So anyway, it took about 30 seconds to find the problem. It only took about 3 or 4 minutes to actually fix it. And just ended up repairing the wire, and it was ready to go. Kind of the most remarkable thing about it all was after I was ready to go, the guy gets back in the helicopter with me. I'm like, "So are you actually going to ride with me again?" He's like, "Well, yeah, I guess if you could get the thing on the ground with all that happening, I think we're okay." So I'm like, "Let's go." So we went for a ride. So, okay, so the next thing we're going to look at in auto rotations is, and we've been talking about the performance of the helicopters in an auto rotation, and so far we've limited it to good old thick air. And to me, good old thick air is about 3,000 to 4,000 feet or below. And like I say, down here in Missouri, we're just, field elevation is 300 feet. So. And we're going to look at compare and contrast the performance of the auto rotation in auto rotation with several different models. So we're going to look at the R22, the R44, R66. I think I got 407, 206, and we'll actually talk about the Huey as well. And we're going to compare its performance in good old thick air versus high altitude performance. All right. And again, I think I'll pick Leadville, Colorado. We'll be at 10,000 feet and putting all our different model helicopters into an auto rotation and compare how one versus the other does. So that'll be on the next video.